5 minutes after they've seen the property on the internet, they're like, oh, it's already under contract. Sorry about that. Or, of course, going under contract before going to the first open home. So it's that real pressure of people just not being able to even visit a property in time to even, one, get a look in and two, submit an offer.
Going once, going twice, sold! You're listening to The Property Pod.
All right, guys, welcome back to The Property Pod, your weekly engagement into real estate here in the Hobart Marketplace. I'm your host, Aaron Horn, and I'm joined at the desk by a savvy crew of real estate agents and financial advisors and king of all things Hobart and Tasmania. I've got Johnny Mack, his old man, Chris McGregor, and Andrew Leggett joining me here again on The Property Pod. Welcome, boys.
Howdy, gentlemen.
Oh, man.
Thanks for having me.
Not a problem. Did I get your title right? What am I meant to call you?
Broker.
Broker. Yeah,
Not a financial advisor.
No, what do they do?
Advise on super.
Yeah, crap. I'm way out of. All right, started weak, but we'll get there. We're going to have a really in-depth discussion today, and we'll have a bit of fun with it. Pat is away. I don't know if anyone's been out there watching, but Pat's if you're following him on Instagram or any of those things, it looks like he's having an absolute blast of a time out there in the wild, wild west.
Oh, that caravan that they got would be awesome. It's an absolute monster.
Yeah, no, just looking at kind of them crossing. Well, they're not even the west yet, or maybe they're not even getting to the west.
They had to make some changes because of weather conditions.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, I heard that his what are the bit that sits out the front that's like your awning? It almost took off like a sail and ended up in Antarctica. So, yeah, very interesting times for our boy. I have heard that Abby still won't listen to it, even though they're driving kilometres and kilometres.
Just put some headphones on, either tune out entirely or fall asleep.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's what Marcus and Kirsten do. They're listening in their car. Yeah, we're putting them to sleep every week.
Not driving, obviously. Yeah.
I know. I was sort of wondering how much fuel he's going through.
Well, I sent him some fuel jokes the other day just to make him feel warm and fuzzy.
All right, boys. So let's jump into some property-related stuff today. What we were hoping to talk about was this kind of days on market trend and how things are heading south on that thing. Well, that's what I think is happening. I'd really like your input on kind of what's happening out there with days on market and what it means for buyers out there in the local Hobart marketplace.
Yeah, well, I guess when we talk about days on market, it's really from the day it's active till under contract. That's why I'm sure a lot of people that have been buying in Tasmania, especially over the last 2 years, have just been, have found when they've even called up 5 minutes after they've seen the property on the internet, they're like, oh, it's already under contract. Sorry about that. Or, of course, going under contract before going to the first open home. So it's that real pressure of people just not being able to even visit a property in time to even, one, get a look in and two, submit an offer.
Yeah. So is there anything that's kind of led us to this point where if you're not kind of on all the apps and on all the realestate.com straight away and you're missing your opportunity, like the window seems so small, is there a reason that's kind of what's happening in the marketplace, or is it kind of
what? Yeah, how is it that? Yeah,
how can you win?
In many ways, it's actually in line with the process that we engage in Tasmania specifically. Other states do it, but we don't do a lot of properties that sell by auction. Because generally speaking, we're measured by days on market, whereas Victoria and Sydney, for example, might measure theirs by auction clearance rates. Because an auction clearance rate's an auction's going to be advertised over a campaign of about 3 to 4 weeks.
Yep.
So there's time obviously in between a visit, and then you're making your bidding on the day. Whereas ours is what's called a private treaty. So you're advertised by an advertised price. There's no set time frame in which the property can go under contract, and so therefore then it's up to just the agent and the owner connecting the property with a buyer and then securing a deal. And that can happen, you can have a days on market of 5 minutes if you wanted to, because, it's like, I'm looking to sell, there's a contract done.
Yeah, okay, sure.
Whereas an auction's going to be over a set time frame. So to see, Dad, when prior to the the verge of the internet, and you've seen, hot and cold markets even before then, what was an average expectation for buyers and sellers of how long the property would take to sell, and what did you do to move it faster?
Well, a lot of it depends on what suburb you're talking about. Like areas like in a city, there's always like we're always using the open home strategy, and in the city, of course, they'd get 10, 15, 20 people coming to the open home. Where out in the northern suburbs, we'd be, if we got one or two, we'd say we had a great day.
Yeah,
and it was really, really different kind of market. And in those days, also too, I mean, if a property had been on the market had been on the market for a while, and then it was a case of looking at its generally its price. You'd certainly looked at its marketing, but if the marketing was good and the presentation was great, and it's still sitting on the market for a while, then you really had to have a crucial conversation with the owners to talk about price.
Yeah.
There was a strategy that one agent used many years ago was under another system, and they said when it was one of those real tough markets, and they guaranteed that they could sell a house in 18 days. And a lot of people looked at it and thought, gee, that'd be great. But what the strategy was, they just reduced the price every day till they hit the sweet spot.
Yeah, fair enough.
And
that'll do it.
And then that would do it. But I mean, that strategy didn't last all that long. But a lot of it, and then there's a friend of mine in LA, he's always said to me, he runs a huge Remax office with 150 salespeople, and he said to me, there's nothing about real estate that price cannot cure. And that is quite true.
I feel like I've heard that before.
Yeah, I do. I have specifically quoted Dad's mate. I think Julie with a thicker accent.
I was going to say, your dad didn't go into any of the accent work that you generally do, John, but no, I have heard that before, so it obviously sticks and obviously works.
It'll be his birthday around now too, I think.
Well, actually, this was an interesting one. So, anecdotally in the market, what we're seeing is that we find there's a bit of a demand disparity, you could say, where we just had one in Glenorchy, which was a true renovator, and that went absolutely bonkers, comparatively, let's say. But, 25 people through the open home. There was, I think 7 or 8 offers, and, it was really, really popular.
Yep.
Then at the highest end, we've got in the same suburb, you've got the property that's absolutely immaculate. So there's no, you move in straight away. There's nothing you need to do. So you're really buying time where you can just move into it, and enjoy the property, off the show.
Yep.
Right in this middle zone of where it's not a true renovator, people don't get super excited by the decor. It's this sort of middle run where also, the prices have increased dramatically for them. So, there is a little pocket in the market at the moment where it's not gangbusters in every aspect. And I'm just curious to see, Andrew, what that looks like from a lending perspective of the challenges you're having from the lower middle to upper end of the market.
Yeah, it has been. That actually has been a bit of a challenge where I've had a few examples recently of some first home buyers. They've looked at a property and they've said, well, I'm going to need 50, 100 grand to throw at it. Can we sort that out after settlement? And the short answer is no.
No.
Because they're already, max lending 95% of purchase price. So there's no equity to borrow against it. And so we've sort of got to go down the line of on completion. So they've got to go and get plans and specs from a builder and get the property valued as if the work has been done.
Yeah.
And then it's a drawdown sort of scenario, like a construction loan. And not every time, if you're spending 50, it's not adding 50 grand.
Yeah.
To the overall valuation of the property. So it is tough, but there are people out there that have, they're cashed up and they're in the position to buy, the ones that need a bit thrown at it because they've got the money behind them.
Yeah, I guess that's the tricky spot. Like thinking of myself when I jumped into the market here, which again, looking at my plan was jumping in, purchasing a place and doing some things like, knocking a wall out or, updating the kitchen and all these things. When I got into the market, I was in a position where, it was at a $300,000, $400,000 price range where it was like, oh, my budget allows me to have that little bit of extra cash to fix up the place.
Yeah.
But if I was trying to do it now, I'd be like, oh crap, I'm going to have to wait another 5 or 6 years before I can rebuild the cash flow to then put that back into this place again, which is then probably at the stage where it's time to move the house on.
Yeah.
And I haven't actually got anywhere.
Yeah. And I think that yours is an exact point of those that where you were now that's the market that's probably potentially the most that's suffering of slowing down, I guess. Not that the prices have softened, that's not what we're saying, but just that takes a little bit longer because I suppose if you have your time again, Aaron, you're thinking, well, if I have to extend my budget, stuff it. I'll just find a way of paying a little bit more and not have to worry about all that time wasted in renovating a house. Because one, it's going to take another, like you said, 5 to 10 years to have that money, and in that time you're not enjoying the house anyway.
Yeah.
So it's a really interesting little anecdotal small part. I know in the notes we're preparing, they had obviously a few interviews from, a local agent, a different property economist, and I think the chief economist from the Ray White Group as well. And I think one of the notes that they had all referenced to, I guess, was the demand that Tasmania is currently under. And I know I gave you boys the REIT statistics and highlighted a couple of years specifically, wherein you look at 2003 and 2021. So these 2 years are the two fastest selling years that obviously we've got since 1996 with our stats. Before that, we don't know. But what's really interesting though is that, the median days on market in for Sandy Bay in 2003, we'll use Glenorchy because it's even faster. So Glenorchy was 13 days and there was 228 sales.
Yep.
Now the days on market they've said is 15, which is probably about the same. So 7 to 14, but there's 77 sales. So we've got just as much pent up demand but there's like less than half the properties available for people to purchase. So when we looked, there was another thing we looked at too, is that there's, resurgence from the REIT have said that in the state as a whole, there's about an average of 20% people moving from interstate. So be it investors or moving in, that number has normally sat around about 15. So so
there's an increase there as well.
Again, yeah. Yep. Now, I remember you telling me something interesting, Dad, about what happened before the first boom of back in the late 90s and moving into the early 2000s, of the difference of what people were doing. Because you said there's a lot of investor stock it was hard to move on. Was that right?
What happened just before the boom, a lot of properties were getting very hard to sell. So what happened was a lot of people, they got transferred for reasons for employment, whatever, family, to go to the mainland. And in the end, they just put them into rentals.
Right.
And moved on. And then, of course, when the boom came, it gave the people a chance, all of a sudden an opportunity to offload a property that they had in the end of the rental departments that they didn't want in there and sold them. So they created a lot of stock in at that particular time for that reason.
Yeah.
So it was a lack of being able to move some properties. A lot of it is because the owners wouldn't accept a particular price. I mean, every house will sell if you read the market.
Sure.
But a lot of them weren't prepared to sell at a certain price range, and they just put them into the rental market.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, again, look at we can have these in the show notes, obviously, but in 1996 in Glenorchy, there were 120 sales. In 2003, there were 228 sales. And then back into 2021, as of September, there was 77 recorded sales. We're assuming it's going to be 100.
Yeah, if you kind of equate it out to the end of the year, that's probably a safe number to guess.
Absolutely. So, I mean, but that's so interesting because last time when the prices doubled, there was way more properties available, whereas the environment's just completely different this time around. You think the amount of stories of people just getting stuck because they can't move sideways. There's, a lack of there's not enough properties to rent, there's holiday accommodation these days, we've got a population growth, we didn't have it back then. So when I went and did a bit of a deep dive this morning, so I thought, I'm going to just go stat heavy. So I had like the, year, the median, the cash rate, the highest, lowest variable rate, all a bunch of stuff. And then I sat there and tried to talk through my friend, and I was just lost in the weeds. So let's not bring that here because, it's there's just so many different factors to it. And I think one of the good things that when we interviewed Simon Presley a couple of weeks ago, he said supply and demand's not enough. I just can't remember the way that he expanded on that, because
the one thing I really took away from that one was when he mentioned how population growth is babies. Babies aren't buying properties.
Yes.
So population growth isn't really a major factor in all of that. There's just so many other factors that lead you down that garden path of what's going on there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, from a lender's perspective, Andrew, if the old, there was this thing that was the CBA had said, look, they would expect a correction once interest rates rise. So that might have an effect on days on market, price, you name it. That's for people much smarter than us. From a practical perspective, what might happen if all of a sudden, the interest rates increase?
Well, it's going to affect borrowing capacity first and foremost. So when we do, as I've touched on in the past, when we're assessing the deal, we're adding that's ceiling rate. So we're assessing at a higher interest rate. So if the rate goes up, loans become harder to service. And so it's probably going to make a bit of a shift in the market, in that someone who was looking at a $600,000 property now needs to come back a peg, which might trigger some vendors having to just sort of readjust their expectations because the market sort of has downshifted. But with the latest increase in the assessment rate, we've not really seen too much of that.
So what's the assessment rate, just to clarify?
So it's a buffer that's added to the advertised rate. So when we work out what someone can borrow, we're not working it out on a 1.99%. We're looking at in the fives.
Okay.
You add about 3%, don't you?
Yeah.
So it's just you're already accounting for that future potential change.
That's right.
Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah. And I've had a few people that have been concerned because they've heard, what's going to happen when the rates go up? Well, can I afford this? Well, yes, because we've assessed at a higher rate. So we know that you're good up to this level.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So when you said they increased the assessment rate, obviously before that you didn't have to have a bigger buffer. Now you've got a bigger buffer and you haven't really noticed too much yet.
No, that's right.
Yeah.
It didn't really affect the borrowing capacity too much in a lot of people. There were a few customers that were sort of already on the line at the pointy end already. But for someone that is really in a good, solid financial position, it might have meant that their borrowing capacity has reduced by 30, 40 grand.
Yeah.
Not so much a big deal.
Yeah, gotcha. Well, I know, like in these little things we said, in 2003, the standard variable said 5.6%. In 2008, it got as high as 8.62%, so quite a fair jump. And now, obviously, it's all the way down to 1.8. So it's like money's never been cheaper, you could say.
That's right.
Yeah.
So the concerning thing is, if rates go back up to that 8 mark,
in theory, yeah,
add the 3% buffer on top, or 3.5%. That's going to really, really reduce a lot of borrowing capacity for a lot of, hard-working mums and dads. Yeah,
especially for people that have really stretched themselves to the absolute limit just to secure property in that sense, eh?
Yeah, that's right.
Well, from here on in then, there's still so much pent-up demand for property from, young people and at every sort of age bracket locally. Who knows, I can't comment on that, Australia-wide. But
just looking at some of these notes that we've got here, the as of this November, data from realestate.com reveals 87.5 of Australia's fastest selling suburbs are all located in Hobart.
Jesus.
That's just insane. So speaking to like what Simon's been saying, is like the property market here is so hot. And each of these areas has a medium time on market of a figure of 7 to 9 days.
So 1 week and it's gone.
So 1 week and it's gone. So you got to be in and out. I'm just going to run through some of these here. 7 days median on market, Lenna Valley, Mount Stewart, 7 Mile Beach. So that's all here.
Yeah.
8 days, Oak Downs, North Hobart. Then it jumps to Cambridge Gardens, which is in Sydney. But then again, South Hobart, Old Beach, Rosny. 9 days, we've got Chigwell, Margate, Moona, Cressy, Lenna Valley, Eschol Park and other parts in Sydney. So just going through all of this, these are 7 to 9 days and it's gone all across Tassie. It's just insane how fast everything is moving.
Oh, and I'd just be so fascinated to see what will be the effect this time round in Tasmania if people stop buying property and stop moving sideways, what would that mean for the amount of people selling, what that means for the days on market, or, it's just because I guess the landscape now is so vastly different than it was, 20 years ago.
Oh, yeah, that's right. When I first got into the industry, I can remember seeing a lot of properties where we'd have to check in the valuation report if it had a selling period greater than 6 months.
Right.
The bank wouldn't like a property
that had sat there for that long and hadn't moved.
Yeah, and so we'd have to make sure that the property hasn't been listed for more than 6 months, or if the valuer was to deem that it would be on the market for more than 6 months. It's a thing of the past at the moment.
We look at those areas, Andrew, where they depend on the postcode. That bank gave a lot of harder time on postcodes to others. Like, for example, like an area like New Norfolk's postcode, that made it a lot more difficult to purchase there for a loan because of where the postcode was. And 7030 was a difficult one at the time. But none of those sort of matter at the moment.
Not at the moment, no. And that's two really good examples, Chris. Given that New Norfolk postcode is such a broad area, someone in Sydney, they don't know what New Norfolk is. If someone's buying a residential, they're just looking at the whole postcode saying, well, don't know about this one.
Well, actually, I'd be interested to get your perspective, Dad, on. I mean, you've had to have conversations with clients at every end of the market, at every and so what about with your sellers then? It's just like I was speaking with a client. Yes, she said, "I will not sell this house for $1 million." She's probably not going to be going anywhere. But how do you have that conversation with your sellers?
When you've got a purchase that's paying a price that you can see it's a very good value proposition, but the price they're offering, and the owner says, "No, we want more." And I've said to them, if you, like for example, a house that's $500,000. If you had $500,000 burning a hole in your pocket right now, would you spend it on this house? And they would say, "Well, no." And that's, "Well, how do you expect anybody else to?"
That's really,
that's really,
I like that.
Really brings them back. Really brings them back.
I feel like I'd be an unrealistic vendor.
Oh yeah,
yeah, and I'd be chasing probably too much. But that's such a great point. That's a good one to remember.
And that's
John sold my house last year, and at the time, we got a good price for it. But you look at it today and you think, I think I could have got more. And John just said to me, "Don't act like a vendor, Dad." And that's what you got to do. You got to think. Your mindset when you're a purchaser is very different to what the mindset of a vendor is. And
it's really, I suppose it's interesting, like from the practitioner's perspective, we might think we're talking logically, but we're dealing in an emotional problem. And so the second the tables are turned and we're a buyer and a seller, we're straight into our emotions. And it doesn't matter how many years of experience you may have under your belt, you'll be like, nah, not doing it.
That's why I find it so funny when you come in and you say like a salesperson has like duped you with like your really expensive pen or your really expensive scarf or your really expensive thing. You're like, "Oh, the salesperson got me." I'm like, their techniques. Like, all the tricks they're pulling, all the things they're doing, but you're just like, "No, they got me.
They got me.
They got in here in my heart." And so I bought on emotion. And it's just kind of like, it's so interesting that, even knowing the tricks, you still can
you're still victim to it.
That is so true, Al, because people, when they're talking to an agent, they're telling them what their specifications are, but they're actually, when they purchase, it's by motivation, or emotional motivation. And that's why I used to, when you have people in the car, I did that the other day for the first time in many years. I actually had buyers hop in the car with me. I took them to properties and showed them, this is what that's going for, that's what it's going for, and then I showed them the property I wanted them to look at. And by the time they got there, they put a contract on it because this is great compared to what you've just shown us. Yeah. But you can't do that when people are just going to open homes.
Or just flicking through something on a computer and being like, "Oh, yep, I saw that one. And often we're making the properties look their absolute best in their photos. Yep. So you're not actually getting a real representation of what really was there. Like it's as accurate as it can be. But you're also dressing it up to look pretty. Looks like it's going to prom.
So, Chris, that must be a bit of an old school technique.
It was an old school technique. Worked very well.
Take the buyers with you, because I can remember my father doing it when he was with Roberts in the early 90s, because the car always had to be spick and span because every day there were people in the car with him.
Oh, yeah, I used to follow him and see where the houses were they was trying to sell.
And the thing is that we haven't changed, So if people were, and we had it for the house at Dowsing Point, I told the clients about it. They said, "No, we don't like the area." I said, "Look, you're 5 minutes away. Drive past, and if you hate it, tell me I'm an idiot. We'll find you something else." 10 minutes later, they come up and said, "John, what do we do to buy it?"
Yep.
So it's that, I guess this has just had this thought, is that in these really strong markets, it's actually, take all the economics element. It's just a strong emotional market. People are high on emotion. In these, with the fear of missing out, which really drives these elements. So, maybe then if things soften, is that people are trying to just, subdue their emotions generally to, let themselves breathe a little bit better, to, take the time to make a decision. But I guess
you don't have the time to make the decision at the moment.
That's the problem,
No.
Yeah, looking here, Angus Moore of PropTrack Economist has basically said, buyers have to make quick decisions with limits on how many inspections and checks they can do beforehand. You've got to kind of roll the dice. Also saying here there are not many options for buyers to choose from. So when it comes, you've got to snap it up quickly.
Yeah.
Which all this data is saying.
I've got a great example of that. So, one of a customer that I'd bumped into at one of your open homes, actually. I didn't even know that she was in the market and she was looking for something and she explained what she was after. I got an email yesterday She's purchased the polar opposite
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
of
yeah.
what she was looking for,
Yep.
unconditional. And I'm just thinking,
What?
okay, you've gone from this extreme to this extreme, and you've gone cash. So,
And that's the reason why you show them everything.
Yeah.
I was thinking about getting a Porsche, but then I got a Volvo.
Yeah.
It's a lot
It's
like
really
that.
safe.
I heard this idea: we buy on emotion and we justify with logic later.
You do.
Yeah.
A lot of people do. And that's when people say, I want to buy this area. I don't want to look at that area. Then they've purchased an area from another agent. So you always just show them everything that you've got because once they get inside, the emotions will come in. And the other thing we'd say to them, that they're not to look at too many properties because in the end they just get house indigestion. And everything starts to look the same. And then they can't make a decision.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I suppose then in days that where there is limited stock, you really got to allow yourself to cast the net further and actually drive through. Don't eliminate it. Allow that. The maybe.
Yeah, no, I really like that, John. I really like everything that's come up today. I think that's probably a good point to jump off the bike and just say thank you for coming in again, Andrew.
Pleasure.
Always a pleasure. I think while Pat's away,
I'll stand in.
you'll stand in. Yep. Excellent to have you on board.
Thank you.
Thank you again, Chris. Always a pleasure to have your expertise on the property pod.
Thank you, Aaron.
Beautiful.
Thank you, John, for just being John.
Until next time.
Till next time, gang. That's the
Cheers,
property
guys.
pod.
Thank you.
Hooroo, bye. You have been listening to the Property Pod, recorded and edited by 414 Media House in conjunction with 414 Property Co.
This podcast is general information only, and the thoughts and views expressed is the opinion of our panel, and listeners should always seek then use their own investigation into any topic we discuss to ensure they fully understand their own situation.
It does not constitute and should not be relied on as purchasing, selling, financial or investment advice or recommendations, express or implied, and it should not be used as an invitation to take up any agent or investment services. No investment decision or activity should be undertaken